Hi, I'm Christine Thomas O'Mealy, and I'm the owner and proprietor of Mezzoid Voice Studio. And what I'd like to about today is how to audition for Golden Age musicals. Specifically, I'd like to offer you 5 tips on giving a great Golden Age musical theater audition. The reason for this is because I find that people tend not to be aware of musicals prior to the decade in which they became cognizant of musicals. So, a lot of my high school students really don't know much prior to 2010. So, when they have to prepare an audition book with different periods of time, they're not quite sure what the style is supposed to be. So that's what I'm here for today, is I'd like to offer some insight into what to know when you're invited to audition for a musical that is written prior to a time that you're comfortable with. So I'm going to share my screen. Some of these slides are from a class that I offered on a course that I offered on musical theater. Specifically, this was the golden age time. So, okay, 5 tips on giving a great golden age musical audition. First of all, you've got to know what the golden age is. When was it? Technically, the golden age starts in 1943 and goes to 1959. But when we're talking about golden age musicals, we often are thinking of times before that. We're thinking of the Jazz Age, Tin Pan Alley, which is about 1925 through 1942. This would involve music of composers like George Gershwin, Cole Porter, think anything goes. Um, George Gershwin, Cole Porter, Jerome Kern, and Irving Berlin. It would also involve the time period from the 1960s through the early 1970s and involving composers like Jerry Herman, um, Harnick and Bach, composers like that. I'll talk about more of those. I have them on a different slide. So, continuing on, what happened in the Golden Age? What is such a big deal about it? Well, at this point, musicals became more truly American. They were set in what was considered the flyover states, in other words, not New York or Hollywood. The stories and songs, rather than just being separate, became fully integrated. A lot of this has to do with Oscar Hammerstein. This was something he wanted to do and succeeded doing in the 1928 musical Showboat, which he wrote with Jerome Kern. But he really brought that to fruition in his collaboration with Richard Rodgers. It made stars out of choreographers. It's often dismissed as sentimental, but it's actually groundbreaking on subjects such as, I can never pronounce this, miscegenation. South Pacific, it had the first person who actually died on stage, which was Oklahoma. The first person to die, first hero to die on stage, which was King and I, my least favorite musical. Spousal abuse in Carousel and later in Oliver. Bigotry in Finian's Rainbow, and in West Side Story, gang violence. The first original cast recording was Oklahoma. And the first Tony Awards came about during this period in 1947. And you say, hey, aren't these shows dated and old fashioned? They might be, but they're also performed on Broadway and in regional theater. The style has evolved, things have changed somewhat, and some shows don't get performed because the topics are the approach to topics are too dated and too sexist. Um, but for the most part, you see these shows being done in high schools. You see a lot of them being done at opera companies as crossover. Um, there are a lot of revivals on Broadway. Here's an example. Here's a list of revivals that we've seen on and off Broadway. And then there's the Encores City Series. This is a list you can find out more on Wikipedia. This is a list of all the musicals that were performed since 2000 at the City Center of musicals that went back to as far as, let's see, 1927 looks like the earliest one that I see, and that would have been, where is that now? That would have been A Connecticut Yankee by Rodgers and Hart. So these musicals are done. They're not bad to have in your book. Okay, so know the composers. The composers that really set the standard for Golden Age musical theater were Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein II. They'd previously been part of other successful partnerships. Richard Rodgers wrote for a long time with Lawrence Hart. Hammerstein wrote with a variety of composers, including Jerome Kern, in which they wrote Showboat together. It was very successful. They also wrote a musical called Very Warm for May, which influenced the young Stephen Sondheim, who came to the theater at 9 years old, heard the show and decided this is what he wanted to do for the rest of his life. We don't know Very Warm for May these days, but it influenced Sondheim. Hammerstein was a father figure to him, so he was a huge influence. He gave him his first work as an assistant on one of his shows. Their first show was Oklahoma. It changed the face of musical theater. Oklahoma made musicals that were strongly based on who people were. And it just was very important. Like I said, somebody died on stage. It didn't start out with dancing girls. It started out with a guy singing off stage with a guitar, riding a horse in. Well, I think he's not riding a horse while playing guitar. That was the most recent revival, was he came in playing a guitar. They wrote 9 shows together. Some of those shows included Carousel, which when you watch it, it's like, wow, this is hard to swallow because of the level of spousal abuse, domestic abuse in the show. The recent revivals have addressed this somewhat by making the character of Billy seem flawed. It's really a wonderful show. Allegro was a failure for them, but it has some wonderful music, and Sondheim writes of it very fondly in his book about words. South Pacific. South Pacific is a musical in which some changes were made. I'll talk about that later. That and Sound of Music has a different approach to casting than the other shows. Oklahoma is what I mentioned. Okay, then we move to Lerner and Lowe. Lerner and Lowe were composer and lyricist. Lerner, the lyricist, was born in New York City. Lowe was born in Austria, and he had more of the operetta influence, and consequently most of his musicals feature a female soprano lead with more legit, and we'll talk about legit in a bit, more legit vocals. Their first big success was Brigadoon. They wrote 5 successful stage musicals and 1 movie musical, which was Gigi. Lowe retired relatively early, 1960. You know, if you look at the dates, he was 59. 59 back then was a lot older than it is now. Lerner did go on and collaborate with others. Again, they did Brigadoon, Paint Your Wagon, Camelot, and My Fair Lady is probably one of the best known. Other composers that you can draw from when you're looking at music from this period, as I mentioned before, from the Jazz Age, Tin Pan Alley, would be Irving Berlin, George Gershwin, Rodgers and Hart, Jerome Kern, and Cole Porter. Other Golden Age classic era composers would be Frank Loesser, Meredith Willson, who wrote Music Man. Frank Loesser wrote Guys and Dolls and Most Happy Fella, as well as others. Harnick and Bach, Fiddler on the Roof. Julie Stein, Funny Girl, there he is pictured with Barbra Streisand. Also Gypsy. All right, so then we've got an overview of who the composers are. What's the style of the Golden Age? So the style, in opera there's a term called Fach. So you have to determine what the Fach is of the style. With a few exceptions, for example, Sound of Music, most shows of the era have very male dominant casts. A lot of male roles, one or two female roles. Some Rodgers and Hammerstein often have three: soprano or mezzo belter lead, another second lead, either soprano or mezzo belter, and usually some wise woman who sings dramatic mezzo or dramatic soprano. Um, yeah, that's the tradition of operetta. Soprano, female lead, mezzo belters, and the additional female roles. This did change over time. When we get to South Pacific, the role of Nellie Forbush is played by Mary Martin, who was a belter. Mary Martin also was the original Maria von Trapp in Sound of Music, which was a belter role, but we think of this as a soprano role because of Julie Andrews. There are two versions of Sound of Music that are available for rental. And one is with the Julie Andrews keys, that's closer to the movie, and one is the Mary Martin version. So if you're auditioning for Sound of Music and you're interested in Maria, find out which one they're using. Because if you're a lyric soprano and you're going to audition for the belt version, you might not have that much success. In that case, you might be better off going for the part of Elsa, because that is a very high soprano role in the show. Male leads were usually baritones, with the tenor as the character actor or second leading man. This is very different from now. Okay, so there's an example of a chart that I made for that course I was teaching of the various leading roles and their voice types. So Lori in Oklahoma was a soprano, Ado Annie was a mezzo, Aunt Eller was more of an alto. South Pacific, Nellie mezzo belter, Bloody Mary, a mezzo, and there was no third female role. Let's see, Sound of Music, Maria soprano or belter. It depends. I have Captain Von Trapp spelled wrong. Mother Abbess soprano, Elsa mezzo soprano. I would say that that's wrong. This was based on some information I had pulled up. Elsa is really a soprano role, rather high soprano role. Perhaps this is referring to the movie version, the information I got here. So what are the stylistic considerations of the golden age? Well, registration. Do you belt or not? To belt or not to belt? That is the question. The thing is that you have voice types that are referred to as legit, as in soprano, and belt. Belters were not anywhere near as high as they are now. We don't have any kind of scrulting going on in Golden Age musical theater. Really, the top note in most things is probably D4 for a belter. It doesn't go much higher than that, if even that high. So belting is different. It's not nearly as intense as it is now. Generally, in the style is kind of a mix of the idea of operetta. Operetta was all about pure vowels and tall vowels, and its Jazz Age was more chatty, conversational, and you also had more emphasis on consonants, on the energy of consonants. And in the Golden Age, it's both. We do have the taller vowels and the purer vowels for the legit soprano, but it is nowhere near as classical sounding as in the operetta period. You also have the chattiness, but there's also a strong sense of the voice that's still involved in that. Consequently, you do have vibrato, not as heavy as in opera or operetta. As far as diction articulation, again, like I said, taller vowels, but not as tall. Pure vowels, but not, well, let's see. When I say pure vowels, I mean if you're singing one vowel, you're singing one vowel. In contemporary pop music, there's a lot of what is referred to as cursive singing. And this is when you're singing a word with, and it becomes ow. I heard somebody the other day singing the word dirge, and she was, and singest a dirge, and singest a dirge. And it was like, dirge? So you hear that a lot in Turning Tables and Skyfall. Adele does it quite often. Who knows? Maybe it's the accent, but I've heard American singers do it as well. Um, as far as what should I wear, that's a stylistic thing too. Don't wear a costume, but if you are auditioning for Maria in Sound of Music, perhaps that's not the time to wear the leopard skin leggings. By the same token, if you are auditioning for a character like Lola in Damn Yankees, that is not the time to wear a buttoned up top and a skirt below the knee. You need to dress to suggest. A full costume would be frowned upon, wouldn't do that, but dress to suggest the role. Okay, moving on. Number 4, picking the right song. So, how do we choose a song? Well, what's your voice type? Are you a soprano? Is the lead role a soprano? Okay, audition for that role. If you're a belter, maybe you shouldn't audition for that role. See what else there is for you. If you are a baritone and the role is that of a very high tenor, it's very unlikely at a high school or regional theater that they're going to be able to change the keys for you. On Broadway, they will, but in your regular high school musical, your limitations are what the score is. And you might be able to make those, but you want to present yourself in the best possible light with the voice type that you have now. What are the audition requirements? Do you have a cut? Do you have to do a cut of the song? How long? Is it 16 to 32 measures? Is it 1 minute to 90 seconds? Do you get to do a full song? Cuts in the golden age era are easier. It's easier to find a 16 to 32 measure cut in those songs because most of them are written in 4 to 8 bar phrases. I'm sorry, 4 to 8 bar phrases. So if you're looking at that, it might be easier to find a good cut. If you get to sing a whole song, I would just keep the song short. Show them what you can with what you have in front of you. Don't take too much time. They'll know what you've got. Is the requirement from the show or not? Maybe you don't have a choice. Maybe everybody who is auditioning is going to have to sing a song from the show. You may have a choice of picking a song, or they may give it to you. In outside performances, in regional theater, in community theater, professional theater, it is generally frowned upon to do something from the show. So it's something to think about. So if you are picking something that is not from the show, what is the compositional style of the composer? Don't use a contemporary song for a golden age musical, generally. I say this because I sat behind the table at a fiddler audition and someone came in and sang something from Little Women. And it was a very contemporary piece with a very chatty vocal production. It did not suit fiddler. So don't use a contemporary song for a golden age musical. So here's some alternatives. For Rodgers and Hammerstein, they have a 9-show catalog of music. You have lots of choices. Let's say you are auditioning for Carousel. Well, then you can sing something from Oklahoma, Cinderella, South Pacific, State Fair, Allegro, Sound of Music, or King and I. Or you could choose something from Rodgers and Hart because the compositional style will still be what's somewhat similar because it's the same composer. Some suggestions. If you're auditioning for Julie, sing Out of My Dreams from Oklahoma. Or sing So Far from Allegro. That's a little more obscure and but it still shows something and it won't be overdone. For Nettie, sing Climb Every Mountain from Sound of Music because Climb Every Mountain and You'll Never Walk Alone are basically the same song. I saw a performance by Joyce DiDonato and she was they played the introduction for her. She went, when climb every mountain. She started to sing the wrong song. And I've been there, so I know exactly what that's all about. You could sing Something Wonderful or Bali High, Something Wonderful from King and I, or Bali High from South Pacific. However, that would be frowned upon unless you are a person of color. Um, Not 10 years ago, but now, as it should be. So that's something to consider. For ensemble, if you're auditioning for the ensemble, sing there. It might as well be Spring from State Fair, a movie, also rather obscure. There is Nothing Like a Dame if you're a guy, sing that from South Pacific, or either sing Edelweiss from Sound of Music. That's especially good too if you don't really have a very wide range. Moving on to Lerner and Lowe. Let's say you're auditioning for My Fair Lady. Your choices are Camelot, Brigadoon, Paint Your Wagon, Gigi. You could also sing, for Eliza, you could sing Simple Joys of Maidenhood or I Loved You Once in Silence from Camelot. You could sing Waiting for My Dearie from Brigadoon. If you're auditioning for Henry Higgins, that's a role that doesn't require great singing. So you could sing something like How to Handle a Woman or I Wonder What the King is Doing Tonight from Camelot, which was written for the same actor, Rex Harrison. They were both Rex Harrison. Rex Harrison was Henry Higgins in My Fair Lady, and he was King Arthur in Camelot. So that's something else to look for. Also, who are the actors? What else did they sing? That might also be a good thing to look at when you're looking at audition repertoire. This role was created by, and that applies to other things as well. This role was created by, let's go into contemporary, Sutton Foster. What else has she sung? You know, I'd go with compositional first, but you can also go with the artist. Also for Henry Higgins, you could sing I'm Glad I'm Not Young Anymore from Gigi. For the Music Man, well, Meredith Willson only wrote 2 shows. This, Music Man, and a not too successful one that was based on Miracle on 34th Street. So in this case, go with something written by either Frank Lesser or Lerner and Lowe, because they would be, both of them would be more classical, more geared towards the operetta, because that would be closer to the style of the Music Man. Getting a little bit later, Fiddler on the Roof. It's a hard one. Harnick and Bach changed their style for every show that they wrote to go with the feel of the show. So Fiorello, The Apple Tree, She Loves Me, Fiddler, they're all very different. They have an obscure show called The Rothschilds, which is somewhat similar to Fiddler in feel. It's hard to find. You can find the music on, I think it's Sheet Music Plus. It's either Sheet Music Plus. Suggestions for Hodel, you could sing What Makes Me Love Him from the Apple Tree, or go to Rodgers and Hammerstein and sing In My Own Little Corner. For Tevye, sing Reviewing the Situation from Oliver, or With a Little Bit of Luck from My Fair Lady, or Edelweiss, or go to the Rothschilds and sing In My Own Lifetime. If you're auditioning for the ensemble, you could sing Papa Can You Hear Me from Yentl. Yeah, I know that's contemporary, relatively contemporary movie musical, but it has a very Jewish feel and that would work. One Room from the Rothschilds for women. I Will Follow You from Milk and Honey for tenor. I'm in love, or Days Gone from. I'm in love from the Rothschilds, or Days Gone By from She Loves Me. So that is alternatives you have. So how do you learn a song? And this is something that applies to both, not both, all genres of music. How do you learn the song? Well, a couple things. Know the whole song. Know the whole song and where it came from. Just don't learn your audition cut. What if they ask you to sing more? Especially if it's a song from the show. And you probably should learn a song from the show just in case you get a callback. I tell people to learn the hardest song that you know, just because the hardest song in the show, just because they may ask you for it. But for this audition, what if they say, "Oh, could you go back a couple measures and sing that?" And if you go, "No, I only know this part," it'd be better to have it. Better to have it than not. Figure out a cut that makes sense. If 16 measures means that the song ends on this chord that doesn't resolve, that's not good. If that's not a good harmonic resolution. There's no resolution. So it doesn't make sense harmonically. Dramatically, if it leaves you hanging, not so good. You need to have a story. You need to have a journey, even if it's only 16 to 32 measures. Which is why you have to know who the character is and what the point is of the song that they are singing. Is it an I want song or an I am song? A song that defines who they are and what they want, why they're singing the song. Is it comic relief? Have things been going on in the show that have been very stressful, and suddenly we need somebody to come in and make jokes and make the audience stop crying? Yeah. Is it a showstopper? Is it the 11 o'clock number? 11 o'clock numbers in contemporary shows would include um, Make Them Hear You from Ragtime, or I had in my head Gimme Gimme from Thoroughly Modern Millie. By the way, Thoroughly Modern Millie, even though it's a contemporary show, it is written largely in a style of the 1920s. So therefore, if there's something in there that you think could work for you in a golden age show, check it out. Learning logistics. Listen to the original cast recording. And don't say that's because I want you to copy it, but I want you to listen to, what does the song sound like in its entirety? What does it sound like with the accompaniment? Is it a full orchestra? Is it just a transparent texture of maybe piano and strings? Is it just chords? Or is it full and heavy? That's going to tell you how you're singing the song in terms of expression, in terms of volume, which takes me to figure out the dynamic markings and the why for them. Why does the composer suddenly want you to sing softly? What's happening there? Why does he want you to sing loudly? Or she? But when we're talking about golden age music, we're talking about old dead white men. So why did they write it that way? What's the reason for it? Don't sing soft just because it says P here. Don't sing loud just because it says F here. Work on the song with someone if possible. Teacher, coach, friend. Know it so well that you can sing it no matter what happens. No matter what's going on with the song. You're singing the song and the pianist goes to Mars, or somebody drops something out in the hallway. You can sing it. They say that you should learn a song so well that you can't so well you learn a song till you get it right, but what it really should be is learn a song so well that you can't get it wrong. So that is my overview of tips on learning a golden age musical song and nailing the audition. If you would like to attend my class tomorrow afternoon at 1:30 p.m. Please feel free to contact me at Christine@mezzoidvoicestudio.com. That's Mezzoid voicestudio.com, Christine with a C. And I will send you a link to register for this. It's a free class. It's 75 minutes. We're going to go over a golden age song to be determined. I know what it is. You'll know if you come. And we'll talk about learning that song from starting it to getting up and singing. So thank you very much. And I hope you have a great evening. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving.